But what I want to talk about in this week's video is whether your writing motivation comes from leisure or pressure. Happy October, everybody. So for this entire month, I'm dressing up in some gothic or slightly costumey sort of thing for all of my videos. And I'll also have my Halloween setup here in the background. If you're new to this channel, that's what's happening. But what I want to talk about in this week's video is whether your writing motivation comes from leisure or pressure. So are you motivated by tight deadlines? Do you write really well under pressure? Or are you the type of writer who needs plenty of time to daydream, experiment, draft, and revise at your leisure? Recently, I've had a number of conversations with other writers, fiction, non, and scholarly, about their writing process, particularly in relation to deadlines and procrastination. Many of these writers shared that they were only motivated to write when they were pressed up against a hard deadline. These deadlines ranged from publication dates, sometimes set by indie authors, to speaking gigs, to academic milestones. So think things like presentations, papers, or even submitting a thesis. These types of writers are not motivated by long deadlines. Many of them said that they would waste the months leading up to a deadline by procrastinating on their writing task. And when they got close to the deadline, they'd go hard and fast in the few days before it was due, whether that was a book, a presentation, or a journal article. Other writers initially described themselves as procrastinators, but when they were prompted a little bit further, they sort of revealed that in those coming months, in the months before the deadline, they would spend a lot of time thinking through their plot, their argumental stance, and then, once the deadline got close, they were forced to just commit to something and get it down onto paper. In both these instances, it was the deadline that encouraged the writer to take action and put words down on the page. Now, what struck me most about these conversations is how many writers work this way. Now, for myself, I prefer a slow and steady approach. I find deadlines immensely stressful, and they often extinguish my ability to think clearly. Now, to be clear, the writers who I was talking to about this also agreed that this kind of pressure was incredibly stressful, but they had sort of just accepted that this was simply their way of working, and while they may prefer to work more consistently, the work alone was just not enough to motivate them. They needed that external sense of accountability. Deadlines are real, and missing them has real consequences. If you don't finish writing a novel that you've put up for pre-order, then your readers are going to be very angry with you, and you might have to give them, or you will have to give them, a refund. If you're collaborating with other scholars on a journal and you don't complete your section on the paper, then you could cause everybody to miss a publishing opportunity. These types of missteps can also be severely harmful to your reputation, and they could affect your ability to secure these sort of opportunities in the future. And this is the fear I think that people find motivating. If I don't finish this piece of writing, then something bad will happen. But could you create this same sense of external accountability without putting your reputation at risk? I think that there are ways, and how effective they would be completely determined on your own personality and what motivates you. But here are some examples or some ideas you could potentially experiment with. You could try setting false deadlines. You could work with an accountability partner, or maybe you would hire a coach or an editor, because by investing money, you might feel more accountable. You could imagine how thankful your future self would be. You'd be surprised at how many people can be motivated by the idea of their future self. You could also set weekly meetings with a mentor or another fellow writer. You could work with beta readers where you organize to send your pages to them by a particular date. You could tell your spouse, your kid, or your best friend that when you finish writing X, you'll go and do something fun, like a hike, a holiday or go to a theme park, that sort of thing. And that would make you accountable again to someone else, that external source. So for myself, even these types of tactics make me feel a little bit stressed and anxious because I prefer writing to be a pleasant experience, whether I'm working on nonfiction, fiction, teaching materials, or academic papers. I work best when I know that I have lots of time to complete a project. I want to sink into the work so that I can focus on the work rather than listening for the ticking clock. Often, I totally overestimate how long it's going to take me to complete a piece. So for my honors thesis, for example, that was done and dusted 2 months before the deadline. The bonus was I got to spend those 2 months doing a fine proofread and fact check and reference check, which is really good because I'm not a detail-oriented person, so I really need that time. Every Time He Dies was complete and totally ready to be published 6 months before the publishing deadline. And now that meant I got to spend all of my energy creating a really solid book release plan and developing my marketing strategies. Now, this is not to say that I don't feel stressed, but my stress is internally generated rather than externally generated. I know that if I don't make time for writing, then the writing just won't happen and I won't get things published. I am more afraid of not writing than writing. If I got into a habit of no longer writing and no longer publishing stuff, then I'd have to go get another job. Even though I want writing to be a pleasant and enjoyable experience, there is, I have to admit, still a low-grade level of stress that comes along. And that's okay, because stress is motivating. Stress forces you to do stuff and to take action. The difference, though, is I actually feel that stress and anxiety before I start writing, like literally the 5 or 10 minutes before I sit down and open my Word document. That's when I feel my stress. But once I'm in the document, it's like the decision has been made and it falls away. Now, for others, they might feel stressed, anxious, or excited while they're writing because of that looming deadline. And that's really the difference. Now, of course, there is no right or wrong way to write. We all create differently and always lead to written products if you choose to put your time and energy into it. The only time it becomes a problem is if you decide that the way you work is no longer working. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What thoughts do you have on this entire topic about only working under pressure or preferring to work under leisure? Please leave a comment below and tell me all about it. Now, if you'd like even more writing advice, you can of course check out the other videos on this channel, or you can go to taraeast.com and dive into the archives. Once you're there, please consider joining my email newsletter. When you do, I'll send you a free gift and you'll get an email in your inbox every single Thursday morning, including links by me, a quote of the week, some resources I've recently loved and think you will too, as well as some other tidbits that I only share via email. Thank you so much for being here and for watching this video. I hope you're having a spooky October and a fantastic Halloween. Now go do some writing because the world actually does need more books.